Hey Matt, how are you?
Fantastic.
Good, good,
Yourself?
good. I'm glad. And thank you for being on this Zoom call so early in the morning, at least for me. And so, yeah, I know we got a chance to speak a little bit earlier this year and also late last year, last school year. And so I appreciate it once again for your willingness to join this. I kind of just I was thinking of a lot of questions yesterday and the day before, and I think even though I've heard it many, many times, it might be nice to just start with how you got started with Juiceland, and like a quick synopsis of that for the audience.
Well, I was working part-time in 2001 at a juice bar on Barton Springs Road called the Juice Joint. I had gotten a part-time job there, probably my third or fourth like food service job where I knew I could just get in, make some quick money and some tips and also get fed. Wherever I worked, I was always looking for that shift meal. It's like, hey, if you work at a sandwich shop, you get a big sandwich, good for the day. So I used to work at sandwich shops and I used to work at I did some construction, but then when I got really close to going to Barton Springs pool, I was going there kind of 3 or 4, maybe 5 times a week, and there was a juice bar right there on Barton Springs Road called the Juice Joint. So I started there in August of 2001, and after a couple years, I became the owner of the business. Changed the name to Daily Juice.
Got it. So it kind of started as like a job you had when you were really young. And I think that's something that's super admirable. And that's something I want to do too, and kind of go into an industry with my first job that I want to grow into. What was really like the turning point for you to go from kind of a job where you were working for Juice Joint to becoming an owner of an actual business and starting that as your full-time kind of career?
Say it one more time.
So like personally, I want to go into a job or an industry that I want to make an actual business in. So I'm just wondering for you, you originally worked there as a job, like you were kind of like a bartender, for lack of a better word. But then
Yeah,
what actually made you the business owner going from that job?
when you see the opportunity for improvement, if you
Yeah.
said to yourself, well, this is okay, but what if we did this, this, and this?
Mhm.
And then you see that, your boss or the owner of the business isn't too hip to that. It's
Mhm.
like, oh man, it's a bit annoying and irksome to see where there can be improvements. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of people that I employ that are sitting around going, I wish we did this differently. And they probably have some great ideas, but bureaucracy moves slow. And, sometimes if it ain't broke, you don't fix it. But where I was working, it was broke. And there was a couple different things happening where I knew, wow, if I just could do this my way, it'd be so much better. And then I got that opportunity to do it my way.
Do you think what like specifically what did you see that was broken or could have been improved? And were any of those things you think like maybe universally applied? Maybe that could also be true in non-juice places as well.
Sure, anytime you're sacrificing quality because you feel like the consumer doesn't want to pay for quality, I feel like that's a mistake. I think more and more people value their time and their energy and their well-being to the point where they're going to pay for quality, whether it be a meal or self-care in any regard, or if you have the chance to have a car that's not going to break down, you'll spend more money to buy that car. So when people have the means to spend a little bit more for quality, they will. And I know there's a lot of McDonald's shoppers out there still, and Walmart shoppers out there. So that's one segment of the consumer base, but there's a lot of people that will pay for quality if you give them the chance.
Agreed. And I think there's an even more amount of people who are going to pay for quality when it comes to like the things they consume. So yeah, the next question I kind of have goes back to the grind up to this point. Um, what do you think was an aspect or characteristic of yours that really got it started and or not started, but really got you to the point that you're at this point? And I'm sure those characteristics have changed over different milestones, but could you kind of just go over and what really you think helped you become as successful as you are today?
Um, a bit of fearlessness, a bit of fearlessness, and some courage, and the ability to trust others.
Got it. So When you say fearless, could you kind of give a couple of examples where those two shined and really helped your company move forward?
Um, when you have to, I like to think about business kind of like poker.
Uh-huh.
You know, you gotta suss out the situation or your cards, if you will, and you have to decide, is it worth a bet? You know, should I bet on this or should I fold? And you can bet and have great cards and still get beat. So
Mhm.
you can't let the fear of losing a hand prevent you from playing multiple hands, because you're going to win one pretty big. So that's kind of where I'm at with the whole deal. Is I was fearless when it came to playing many hands. And for me, playing many hands means signing a bunch of leases. Because
Mhm.
when you sign a lease for your business, you're obligated to that contract.
Yeah.
And so in the beginning we had 3 stores, and then we had 4, and before we knew it we had like 15, 16. That was all because I was just out going, this is going to work, this store is going to work, this store is going to work, this is the right neighborhood, this is the right space. So that's really, once we got that kind of momentum going where we had 16 locations, we really started to get attention and build the brand and get popular. And
Mhm.
it took that kind of accelerator pad of signing leases and getting stores open.
Got it. And I've definitely seen that like willingness to commit, even if like some people are unsure, as like a successful trait, because there's another company called Swell and they sell water bottles, and the founder like immediately purchased 3,000 and she had to pay it off in 30 days, which like kind of just forced her to start selling. So I admire that. Um, so now according to the internet, Juiceland is around, and I could be wrong, and the internet could be wrong, is a $28 million business. What do you think over this period of time was the hardest part, whether that's at the start or like maybe even this year?
Ooh, the hardest part. Um, the hardest part, honestly, is when you've got a company that's been around for 20 years.
Mhm.
Certain people stay with the company, and certain people kind of go. And so, saying goodbye to people that helped build the business and people that I've become close with over the years, that's always difficult, because people say like business is like a family, but
Mhm.
not really. Because I mean, with a family, especially mine, people don't come and go. It's like we're family, we stick together. But with a business, people change, they change their career trajectory, the business has different needs. So it's
Mhm.
just kind of that, like, saying goodbye to people is very difficult, and at the same time you wish them well and you want their success. And I think of it like a sports team. You could
Mhm.
have Tom Brady playing for the New England Patriots for whatever 20 years and winning 7 Super Bowls, and then he goes to Tampa Bay. So it's kind of the nature of the game to switch teams, but it's just, I've always found it to be a little bit more difficult than I anticipated.
Yeah. Yeah, and that makes sense. I guess the next kind of avenue I want to go down is just this question of marketing. And this was actually the first question I asked you my junior year when you came to the University of Texas. And it was understanding in a business like this, you can have a great product and a great quality product. And over time, that organic marketing will be there. But as you mentioned, like you have to show up first and people have to know who you are. And I know signing leases and being in different communities was one of the ways. But could you talk a little bit about what else you think was really powerful marketing, not only for Juiceland, but it could also be applied to like potential other companies?
Well, I've always, let's see here, I got a couple things. I like I like social media to be conversational. So, not like a bot responds, like, good for you. How was that? Like, we actually, I like to be in the social media where we're having conversations with our customers the same way we would at the counter.
Mhm.
Because these days there's just a lack of connection in person. People will be on their phone. People are less talkative. The world has changed in the last 20, 30 years so significantly when it comes to just in-person connection. And
Mhm.
so I've tried to at least have my team show up in social media and be conversational, to go a little bit deeper, to find out what people like, what they value, how their day is going, and just to be kind of funny. So I think we've done a good job with that over the years, just kind of being that voice on social media. The other way I love to do marketing is through music festivals and music events. So, we've been at ACL for like 11 or 12 years, and our booth is always just like so much fun, and the crew is having so much fun. and we're serving a great product. And I think it really puts people, like, it makes us memorable. So standing out where there's like all these brands present, it's kind of like we're all on stage, and kind of trying to win the consumer's attention. So
Mhm.
I've always thought that was a good way to recruit. And then the other ways to do marketing is just to make connections with people that come into the store. Like as the founder, my favorite thing to do is to go to a juice land and just strike up a conversation with a customer or a crew member and find out like what they think of this certain drink, or what they think of, just to get in a conversation, because I always learn something and I'm always glad that I did. It's just like, it's the most fun part of my job, is connecting with people.
That makes sense.
Yep.
Um, I feel like at least in the entrepreneurship space here at UT, and I assume anywhere, there's always aspects of starting a business that are uncomfortable, whether that's going and pitching your product to someone randomly, or like trying to sell it, I don't know, door to door. What was something that was extremely uncomfortable for you getting started, but you think now was like you're really happy that you did?
Well, for me, I started a juice bar with my coworker called Daily Juice in 2003. In
Mhm.
2009, there was a franchise given out, and some investors came in, and it just kind of got a little bit what I would call messy. There was too many cooks in the kitchen, and I
Mhm.
didn't really feel like I could make the make the headway I wanted with my vision. So I broke off and I rebranded my juice bars as Juiceland. And
Mhm.
that was really scary, to be building a brand for 8 years and decide that you're going to change it and expect the community to understand and still support you. That was very scary for me, but I knew I had to do it so that I could, you know, get things done my way. And that was what stands out to me to be the scariest thing, because I was like, wow, everybody's got the bumper stickers of my brand on their car, and I'm about to change the name, so it's like, it just doesn't feel, it doesn't feel
Yeah.
comfortable. So that was one thing that really
Uh-huh.
stands out, is rebranding.
Got it. So when it came to that rebranding, how did you go about getting business again? And I assume if you broke off, those locations previously aren't yours anymore and you had to open new ones. So how was that like kind of restarting the juice?
Actually, it was the other way around. The locations that I had, I rebranded those to Juiceland. So really, I had that confidence that the locations would be the same, so people would show up and go, "Oh, what's going on here?" And it
Mhm.
was the same folks working, so it was the same culture, and the menu was very similar, so people could navigate it. Um, so to answer your question, it wasn't so. I didn't have to leave the locations, and that was the most helpful thing.
Got
Um, One thing I did is I started the social media accounts. So when I rebranded the buildings, I also rebranded the social media accounts. So people, it was a little bit more seamless than I would expect, because people didn't have to go anywhere different. They didn't have to go find anything on social media. It was just like we had just changed our name. But that was really the launch pad for the success, because once I was in full control of my own brand,
it.
without having to, go through hoops and ladders with different people's decisions and all that, I could really just hit the ground running and make decisions quickly, and that's what we did.
Yeah. And hitting the ground running is like this other kind of topic I want to talk about with like young entrepreneurs. There's always this problem of like actually getting up off the ground. And I kind of want to go back to this idea of like, how did you, so working at ACL and thing and buying a bunch of leases probably requires an upfront amount of money, or at least getting some money at that point. How did you get from like that 0 to 1 stage? Was it just you had a good location, I guess, near Barton Springs, or what really did it for you to start getting sales?
Okay. Um, if you wouldn't mind repeating the question for me one more time.
Yeah. So essentially, a lot of college entrepreneurs have they have great ideas and they have great resources, but it's really hard to actually get those first sales and actually become revenue generating. So, what advice and what did you do that actually helped you get from 0 to 1?
The same thing I tell people that are starting their consumer packaged goods company, which really is a grocery type industry, consumer packaged goods, because you have to be grocery stores and convenience stores, is you have to, number one, give it away. whatever it is, you have to just give it away. You have to get what you have into people's hands.
Mhm.
And generally, if you want to scale that, that means you have to have a lot of funding to get a lot of free product to people.
Yeah.
Um, so for my, for Juiceland, I always said we just want people to taste the smoothies. We just want them to try it out. So I'd go so far as to just walk outside and somebody's walking by, hand them a smoothie, say, "Hey, one on the house," or a card that says "free smoothie" or half off your first purchase. Like
Nice.
anything to get someone's interest. And usually you have to either give it away or discount it significantly to do that.
Okay, that is very valuable advice. Um, the next question I have kind of goes on a spin off of this. If you didn't work at that juice bar in Barton Springs, what do you think you would be doing right now?
Oh, that is a great question. Um, Honestly, I might be, I feel like I probably like to do my own thing. So
Mhm.
I'm not sure I would be working for anyone else. But I could see that if I hadn't started working at that juice bar, I most likely would have ended up in the restaurant industry. Two of my best friends both own bars and restaurants, and we kind of like look around. We're like, because we met in high school. I'm
Mhm.
like, how come we're all doing this? And I think it's because we, if you like to have a good time, you like to host parties. And if you have a restaurant, you're kind of hosting people every day, like it's your music and it's your vibe and
Mhm.
you're kind of the host and you want to create a memorable experience. So I feel like the reason that I'm in that industry is because I love the idea of serving people, making them feel uplifted. And, a lot of jobs probably it's not as tangible as saying, like, how do you like this thing that I made for you?
Mhm.
That's a really cool feeling. And that's why I respect restaurateurs so much, is because I know behind the scenes how much time and effort it takes to run a restaurant, and
Mhm.
it really is a labor of love. And so I probably would ended up in the food service doing either a restaurant or a bar, or I don't know, it might even just been bartending, something of that nature, where it's just like you're just kind of making sure people are having a good time and getting a good product.
Got it. Well, I'm definitely glad you started Juiceland and not just a restaurant, even though I'm sure the restaurant would have been great too. Um, the next question I have is over maybe like the last 20 years, has there been anything like, what do you think is the craziest place you've been or the craziest thing you've been able to do due to the fact of Juiceland existing? So I know ACL sounds pretty crazy, but I was wondering if there's anything else that you think is just like a really memorable story that you didn't expect to happen.
In 2007, I married my high school sweetheart in Kauai. We did a wedding there on the beach.
Uh-huh.
And then 7 years later, in 2014, we were flown to Hawaii by a potential investor that wanted to open a juice land in Kauai. And so we
Uh-huh.
had to take our two kids and go to the beach where we got married and show them where the beach was.
Wow.
And then 9 months later, our third daughter was born.
Uh-huh.
So being in Kauai with my family, and
Yeah.
and adding on to that family with our third daughter, like that was super memorable for me. 2014 was an amazing year because we had our third daughter. My wife gave birth at home, like a home birth that she would really been like working up to, where it was a really probably the most meaningful moment of my entire life was seeing my wife give birth to our third child. So I always link that back to thank God we went to Hawaii in March and
Yeah.
explored the juice land there, which is a funny story because then one of my former crew members moved out there and opened Juice Island with my same logo with the investor. And I was like, hey, what are you guys doing? This is crazy. You can't rip off Juice Land like this, but they did. So I thought
Well,
that was funny. And
is
that's
that
just
like,
one,
is
yeah.
that location doing well in Hawaii?
No, it was
Oh,
a food truck, and I don't think it was managed very well, and it didn't stay around. But we
cool.
also opened up a juice land in uh, Brooklyn in 2014 with one of the restaurateur friends I mentioned. So having a juice land in Brooklyn was so cool. I could go visit it 3 or 4 times a year and kind of get to know that like community and be a part of that scene. I love New York City, so that
Mhm.
was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
I lived in New York this summer, and I could totally see a juice land in Brooklyn. Is it still there?
No, in 2018 the lease was up, and
Uh,
we didn't renew. Our location was in between two subway stops, so we didn't get the
Got it.
traffic that we needed. But yeah, we would definitely consider going back to New York sometime. We really like Denver. We really like Nashville. We really like Florida, Arizona. So the whole country
Got it.
is, I think an opportunity for us to grow. But currently, we're just focused on Texas.
And that makes sense. I think Texas is still a very booming market. The next question I want to go into, or the kind of theme, is just like the difficult aspects. Um, a lot of times, from what I've heard from great entrepreneurs and CEOs, is that the hard times does make you tougher and makes you a better leader. So, what has been your least favorite part about being an entrepreneur? Not so much like one specific event, but maybe like a recurring thing or a theme that you have to deal with.
Whew, let's see here. Um, let's see here. It's difficult. Well, the idea that that I've made it. People are like, "Oh yeah, you got it. You've made it. You're set. You're done." It's
Mhm.
like it's every day is a new challenge to keep the business thriving and growing, and considering all of the challenges that we face with rising rents and surplus cost of fuel and all the different things that add up. I mean, restaurants are a very thin margin versus like say a tech company.
Yeah.
So it's the idea that like we're so successful that we don't have to worry. That like it's like no, every day my team is doing our absolute best to keep the lights on.
Mhm.
And my president Mark Jacob says if you're ripe, you're rotting, and if you're green, you're growing. And so the idea that every day we're growing and changing and trying to improve, that's like the core of the business. And it
Mhm.
just bothers me that anybody thinks that we're like, just resting on our laurels and there's nothing, that we're just good to go. We're this big corporation because really Juiceland is still a very small business compared to the people we're competing against. Uh,
Mhm.
Starbucks is a great example of a company that we're competing against that does billions of dollars of revenue and
Mhm.
billions of dollars in profits.
Yeah.
And for people to compare us is like it's just unfair. So when I see the little guy, the small business get compared to a bigger business, it bothers me because it's just there's a lack of understanding there, and that's fair enough. I mean, I don't think I understood the world, you know, perfectly when I was in my 20s, but yeah, the lack of understanding around how we're barely scraping by just to make sure everybody's taken care of.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult. I guess it was called. I guess you'd say the lack of awareness around what it takes to be successful. Um,
That certainly sounds difficult. And kind of going into that next question, what's like you think has been like the hardest decision you've had to make um throughout all this time over whatever the last 20 years?
the hardest decision I've had to make is probably um, to 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 fund a store, to borrow money from the bank, to build the store out, to equip it, to staff it, and do our best to be successful, and then realize that for whatever reason we just don't have the customer base, and then you have to close that store
Mm.
and walk away, and you still owe all the money on the debt. Back to the poker analogy, it's like you played a hand and you went all the way to the last card, and boom, you lost the pot. So that's tough, and it's happened several times, but I just consider that to be just like a good sports analogy. You win some and you lose some, and you just hope you win more than you lose.
Yeah. Every time I see you in person or even on a call, you're like very invigorated with energy. And I'm wondering, do you ever deal with like burnout of any sense, or and if you do, like, how have you dealt with that to any extent?
So ever since I've been a young kid, I've been very hyperactive, very energetic, and I just feel like that's kind of my like modus operandi. So I'm kind of go go go, and to feel burnout, no, not so much. I love breath work and meditation and yoga and basically the idea that you can be renewed with a reset of your nervous system if you just sit, ground, breathe. Breath work is also a really quick way to do that. So I love the Wim Hof method, and I use that. Also, I love the new technology of the cold tanks and then the warm tanks where you go back and forth for 2 minutes. So there's a place in Austin I go to, and if
Mhm.
I'm feeling like oh man, I need to like reset, I'll go do something like that, and it seems to keep me pretty energetic just to like you know switch it up with my nervous system.
Got it.
So yeah,
You're
I
you're
wish I
preaching.
discovered that stuff earlier on, but now I think back to it. I was going to Barton Springs pool in my 20s and doing like, holding my breath underwater, trying to swim across the pool, widthwise. So I've always been kind of experimenting with yoga and breath work.
And that's amazing. And you're definitely preaching the same thing my dad preaches to me about meditation and breath work. Um, what has been the greatest investment you've made like outside of the business, whether that's in yourself? So I know you kind of just mentioned like health. Are there any other great investments you've made once you kind of got the business running?
I mean, nobody wants to hear this in Austin right now because of the home prices. But when my wife and I first started out, we had a small home outside of town that we bought for like no money down. That was back in 2007 when you could buy a house and they'd
Mhm.
actually give you money to buy a house.
Yeah.
That's what led to the whole crash of the housing market. But we had our tiny house out there in Oak Hill, and in 2013, my wife was like, let's move into Austin. And she led the charge, and we were able to buy a house that ended up being a great investment.
Mhm.
So that's my best investment outside of Juiceland is following my wife's lead and finding a house that we just loved that really increased in value in a short time. And that was back in 2013. So all credit to her.
Got it. And for the last leg of this interview, I kind of want to go a little bit spiritual, maybe.
Okay.
What do you think is your meaning in life? Because you've grown this business, and I know it's still very hungry and you're still very hungry, but it is wildly successful compared to many people's businesses that they try to start. But when looking back on it, or even now looking ahead, like what do you want your meaning and maybe even your impact to be before you leave the world?
I heard someone recently on a podcast talking. I think it was a script writer. I think he'd written some movies, and he was talking about this creative wave that like it's almost like when you think about an underground aquifer. There's all this water underground, and sometimes it bubbles up and creates Barton Springs, for instance. So
Mhm.
there's this creative aquifer that exists underneath all of our consciousness, and if you tap it, things will spring up, and there can be beauty. And so I'm all about creating either special moments. I'm about creating special environments, and I'm about creating special memories. And so I think as long as I'm inspired to create and not really care if it doesn't work out, like that's my whole thing. In fact, I had a birthday last night, and my daughter, my 14-year-old daughter, she said, Dad, I love the way that you just don't care what people think, and you just do your own thing. And it's really inspiring to me. And I mean, like, that was so moving to hear her say that, because I kind of think that's what I'm most proud of, is that, yeah, I don't care what people think. I'm just going to try to do it my way. And so, um, creation as a spiritual outlet, a way to feel a part of the divine. Like, I'm all about it. So there's not a day that goes by that I'm not like, should I do nothing right now, or should I engage in this moment in a way that will create a memory or something that's something you can feel good about. So that's my journey, is to try to create as much memorable moments as possible.
Mhm. That's brilliant. And for the last question of all my interviews I've been doing this year, I just give the floor to you. It's an opportunity to like kind of plug anything you want, or give any advice you would want to give to maybe the young people who are listening to this podcast.
Well, I wish I would have known more in my 20s about self-care. And I think self-care, a self-care regimen, you see a lot of people, they work out and they get that runner's high, and they need it, like they crave it.
Mhm.
And I would just encourage anyone to um, try to carve out more time for self-care, whether that's meditation, yoga, acupuncture, massage, tai chi, being in nature, whatever it is. It's just really important, because I think we can get lost in our technology and lost in our habits and our routines. And then time flies, and you don't know what you're missing. But like clean eating, like doing a 5-day juice cleanse was one of the most revelatory experiences of my life, because after day 2 or 3, it's very hard. You're kind of grumpy, you're kind of hungry. And then on day 4 and 5, you feel euphoric, elated, focused, you sleep well, you're unafraid to tackle projects. So I do think that my first juice cleanse was something that really inspired me to think to myself, wow, I can biohack, or I can manipulate my system to get to an elevated state. And so now I'll do a juice cleanse for 10 or 12 days, and I feel like I'm on fire. Like I can just tackle any project and really go after a goal. So that's something that I would share, that if you want to break out of a mold and lift your spirit and elevate your consciousness, try to do a juice cleanse. Fasting really works, and it's been a part of ancient traditions in many cultures. If you look into fasting, I just saw the Chris Helmsworth, I guess it's a documentary called Limitless, and I saw the episode on fasting, and that looked a little tough. He was doing just water for 4 days, and I don't know if he got to that euphoric, elevated state, because if you're drinking juice, your blood sugar's up, you feel invigorated. If you are hungry and you drink a juice, you're not hungry anymore. So anyway, I'm always trying to talk my friends into doing juice cleanses, and I think they're really amazing ways to shake it up and get to a higher state.
Yeah. The longest fast I've done is maybe like 32 hours, but I'll definitely look into the 5-day juice cleanse. It's pretty insane.
Yeah, you just drink it anytime you get hungry, you drink some juice.
Noted.
But you got to make sure the juice is raw and fresh. Most of my competitors in the juice world now are processing their juice, and you go into the store and you buy it off the shelf. It doesn't expire for 3 months. And the reason it doesn't expire is it's not fresh.
Mhm.
It's not full of life. And at Juiceland, we use raw, cold pressed juice. So you get all the nutrients and the enzymes and the life force. And it's very, very crucial to get that. Imagine a good comparison is what is a good comparison? Well, sunlight versus a light bulb.
Mhm. That's a pretty
You know?
good comparison.
Yeah, like there's light bulbs that are like natural light. You're like, yeah, I
Yeah.
got the natural light bulb. It makes me feel good. I'm like, yeah, I'd like to go get in the sun personally. So that's the difference between fresh juice and processed juice.
Got it. This has been a brilliant interview, Matt. I'm really glad you came on, and I really appreciate your time. Thank you, man.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yep.